and Dr. Mario Antonio Hiz, the second of the head of the Immunology Department Research Institute for Tropical Medicine. Again, welcome to our Kapihan session. Gentle reminder to our media partners, please send your questions in our Zoom chat box and we will accommodate them after we exhausted all the questions submitted in our Google form yesterday. And we will be strictly accommodating questions that are related to our topic today. So without further ado, may I call on Dr. Jean and Dr. Mario for the presentation. Dr. Jean, Dr. Mario.
Yes, thank you, Aki. No? So I'll take the introduction of talk, the topic for this morning, which is an update on the COVID vaccine. And specifically, we'll discuss the Moderna vaccine. No? We will not discuss everything about Moderna, but we'll focus on the following. Can we have the slide, please, Aki? Okay. So here with me today is also our immunologist in the vaccine expert panel and part also of the Research Institute for Tropical Medicine, Dr. Mario Hiz. So our objective here is, next slide. We will provide the bulk of the talk will be about the data on booster doses with Moderna vaccine and how effective this vaccine is, not only against the original Wuhan strain variant, but also for the variant of concern. And the latter part of the topic will also be on the variant boosters, which Moderna has formulated in order to expand and enhance the ability to protect us against other variants of concern, not only with one variants of concern. So at this point, I will give the floor now to Dr. Mario to present and expound on the non-human clinical studies of Moderna booster doses.
Okay, thank you, Doc Jean. I hope you can see the slides. Aki, can you confirm? Yes, okay. So thank you, Doc Jean. So today I'll be discussing, two papers that were presented on data on Moderna. And, to our media partners, allow us to share with you some of the insights of what we do at the Vaccine Expert Panel, particularly on, medyo hindi natin napag-uusapan kasi yung ibang animal studies na ginagawa on vaccine development. So these two papers that I will show will highlight, the initial or the preclinical work that our vaccine developers are doing before they even do clinical trials. Okay, so the first paper that we're going to talk about is by Corbett, or titled Protection Against SARS-CoV-2 Beta Variant in mRNA 1273 Vaccine-Boosted Non-Human Primates. So if you notice, this was a paper last year, medyo late na ito, and is focused on the beta variant. So ang context natin dito is that when we created the vaccines in 2020, all of the vaccine manufacturers were using the original Wuhan strain. And so every time there's a new variant that comes out, it is quite, concerning sa mga vaccine developers kasi the first question that they will ask is, effective pa rin ba yung ating vaccine na ginawa based on the Wuhan strain on these new variants? So to test that, they would usually do preclinical studies in monkeys as well, and also in mice or in rabbits, pero more importantly sa monkeys talaga. And here, what they're also interested is, may value ba kapag gumawa tayo ng variant-specific vaccine? So ito, gumawa sila ng beta-specific variant back in early 2021 and see if nakakatulong ba itong heterologous na beta variant vaccine if we include that as a booster. Okay, so those are going to be the data that we will talk about. And what they found in this study is that after boost, the animals had increased neutralizing antibody levels across all variants of concern, sustained for at least 8 weeks after the first boost. And interestingly, a major result of this study was that hindi masyado kailangan yung variant vaccines to be implemented para magkaroon ng protection against variants of concern. And we'll discuss that later on. Okay, so as we all know, our vaccines are given 2 doses, 4 weeks apart. So ito yung kanilang original vaccination, dose 1 and then dose 2. And if you measure antibody levels, several weeks after that, we expect very, very high antibody levels, as explained here. And then over time, after say 6 months, we expect that the antibody levels decline. So as you can see here, we see a reduction in antibody levels over time, and that's what we call waning immunity. And concerning po yan kasi when we have lower antibody levels, we expect na the protection of the vaccine will also wane. So that is why it's a great impetus for us na kapag ganito nakababa yung antibody levels, we do a booster vaccination. Kaya po meron po ditong third arrow sa baba. And lo and behold, kapag nagbigay po tayo ng booster vaccination, the antibody levels go up again, similar to their initial levels. So this is very encouraging news, suggesting that the boosters are effective and are working against the virus, okay? And this is in particular to either the wild type or the beta variant. So regardless po kung ang binigay natin ay 3 beses ng same vaccine, which is this one, mataas din po yung kanyang antibody levels to both the original strain and the beta variant, or kapag binigyan tayo ng 2 doses ng original Moderna vaccine and a third dose or a booster dose of now their beta variant specific vaccine, tumaas din yung kanilang antibody levels. But it's striking na kahit po yung original variant, yung original strain ng vaccine, kahit siya po yung ibigay mong booster, mataas pa rin yung binibigay niyang antibody level. So you don't need to have a specific beta variant vaccine in order to induce protective antibody responses. And mas striking po yan dito sa panel na to kasi they're using neutralization assays. As we mentioned before, we explained before, neutralizing antibodies are the functional version of our antibodies. So ang kagandahan po dito is that when we give the booster dose, either the original Moderna vaccine or their new created beta variant Moderna vaccine, pareho po yan nag-increase ng neutralizing antibody levels sa mga monkeys na vaccinate nila. So either of these 2 vaccines is sufficient to do that. So again, what we're saying here is that the spike or our RBD IgG antibodies and the neutralizing antibody levels here, after boosting, all increased at similar levels when boosted either with the homologous original Moderna vaccine or the beta variant Moderna vaccine. And the antibody avidity or strength of binding is similar for both the homologous and the variant strains. Okay, and alam naman natin na ang SARS-CoV-2 virus or yung COVID infection natin, ang tinatarget po niyan ay yung ating lungs and the airways, So this study, since these are animals, we can collect different specimen from different parts of the monkey. So here they collected what we call a bronchoalveolar lavage, or kinokollect po niya yung parang fluid or liquid doon sa may lower lungs natin. And they were asking the question na meron bang antibodies doon sa may lungs mismo ng monkeys? And the short answer is yes. After vaccinating with either 3 doses of the Moderna vaccine or 2 doses of the Moderna vaccine plus 1 dose or the booster dose of the beta variant, pareho po silang may mga matataas na levels of IgG or antibodies dito sa tinatawag nating BAL or bronchoalveolar lavage. So this is encouraging, suggesting na doon po mismo sa site of infection na very critical nga for our protection, doon mismo sa lungs, the antibodies are actually present there and are supposedly functional. And the functionality is shown here in their what we call ACE2 binding inhibition. So kaya niya bang i-prevent yung pag-bind ng COVID virus dito sa kanyang receptor na ACE2? And we can see here this is the reduction, the percentage reduction of binding. So we can see up to 60-80% protection or inhibition of binding kapag na-vaccinate and na-booster po itong ating mga monkeys. And similarly, they found also a similar trend when they collected yung ginagamit natin sa RT-PCR, yung nasal swab. So yung nasal swab kasi pinagkaiba niya sa bronchoalveolar lavage is this is more on the upper airway. Medyo sa taas po siya kasi nasa ilong lang siya versus itong bronchoalveolar lavage medyo sa ilalim siya, sa lower lung po siya. So kahit regardless kung nasa BAL man siya or sa nasal swab, pareho po nilang nakita na meron pa ring antibodies and meron pa ring functional antibodies dito sa mga locations na to, suggesting that these vaccines can elicit and generate antibody levels at the site or at the organ where it is most important, where it is most relevant, particularly in the upper and the lower airways. Okay. Sige. And then we were also mentioning in previous talks about the importance of T cells. So again, T cells are your soldiers of the immune system. Sila po yung nagsusurveillance sa ating buong katawan to see if there are microbes, pathogens, or even allergens, infections. And then once ma-identify po nila itong mga to, they will aggressively attack our cells that are infected with these pathogens. So what we're looking here is the profile of T cells found in these immunized animals. So here you have animals that were not immunized, animals here that were immunized with 3 doses of the Moderna vaccine, immunized with 2 doses of the Moderna vaccine plus 1 dose of the beta variant vaccine. And this is just 2 doses of the beta variant vaccine. And what they found out here is that most of the T cells are of the Th1 type. Now, what is the Th1 type? The Th1 type is the arm of the T cells which are highly effective against antiviral and antibacterial infections. So in contrast, kasi like for example, for a Th2 is more for say antiparasitic or even allergy-like reactions. So what we want actually for a vaccine for COVID-19 are Th1 activated T cells. And dito po sa mga na-vaccinate nila with the Moderna vaccine, lahat naman po sila ay suggestive of a Th1 profile. Naging mataas po yung kanilang percent of memory CD4 T cells that are activated with Th1 cytokines such as interferon gamma, IL-2, or TNF compared to Th2 cytokines. So this is suggesting that the immune response that is being generated by these vaccines, by the Moderna vaccine, is actually of the correct type. It is inducing antiviral responses and not, anti-allergy or anti-parasitic infection responses. And that also is the reason why bakit po napakataas yung efficacy rate ng mga vaccines na to. Okay. And the beauty of animal models is that, hindi lang na pwede natin silang bakunahan, pero actually after natin silang bakunahan, we can actually infect them and see if the vaccine was actually effective in controlling the infection. So like they did here in the rhesus macaques, of course they would do the primary immunization first at week 0 and week 4, and then they would boost at week 29, and then also another boost maybe at week 33. But at week 38, they can start doing a challenge infection. Challenge infection meaning they will infect these monkeys with the COVID virus. And in this particular study, they did a beta variant specific infection kasi they wanted to know if the vaccine is still effective against the beta variant. So what did they see? They see that 2 days, 4 days, and 7 days after the infection, there is almost no itawag natin ito subgenomic RNA, or there's almost no virus in these vaccinated animals. So this is what you see here, itong mga brown, mga gray dots, ito po yung mga animals na hindi po sila vaccinated. Okay? So they have very high RNA copies, or they have high viral loads. Marami po silang virus nandun sa kanilang lungs. Pero those that were vaccinated either with 3 doses of the Moderna vaccine or 3 doses or 2 doses of the vaccine plus the beta variant specific vaccine, sila po at day 2 pa lang halos mababa na, significantly mababa na yung viral loads. And then mas striking pa on day 4 and particularly at day 7, talagang walang virus na nakita sa kanilang mga lungs, sa lower lungs nila, sa BAL. So this suggests that the vaccine was very effective against the challenge virus infection. And this is also very similar to what they found in the nasal swab, although mas marami silang na-detect muna na virus dito doon sa nasal swab at day 2 and day 4, pero at day 7, bumaba na rin yung number of virus particles or viral load. And if you actually try to culture, the virus that are in these samples, mas striking po yung naging results. Kasi if you see the viral titers here using tissue culture, at day 2, talagang wala silang nabuhay na virus doon sa bronchoalveolar lavage or sa nasal swab ng mga monkeys na to. Dito lang sa thrice vaccinated lang ng Moderna, pero dito sa may beta variant specific booster, hindi nila nakita na yung live virus dito sa nasal swab. And you compare that always with the control. Sa mga hindi vaccinated, ang taas-taas po ng kanilang viral load kumpara mo doon sa mga vaccinated. Again, with the reduction in the number of viruses that survive after challenge infection, this suggests na vaccination with 3 doses of the Moderna vaccine is sufficient and is highly protective of the beta variant. After the three doses. So with that, so ito yung summary ng findings ng first paper. It says that the SARS-CoV-2 mRNA vaccine shows between 90 to 100% protection against the original virus or even the beta variants when administered 2 weeks apart and assessed within a 2-month window period. And around 6 months after the primary 2-dose series, the third dose or the boost vaccination resulted in higher neutralizing antibody levels against the beta variant of concern in these monkeys. And regardless whether the boost was from the original vaccine or the beta-specific version, the similar increases in neutralizing antibody levels were observed and resulted in enhanced viral protection. And in conclusion, the data reported here show that the homologous Moderna boost can significantly improve both the breadth and potency of neutralizing antibody responses and confer protection against not only the upper but also the lower, hindi lang sa nasal swab, kundi pati sa BAL, to a heterologous challenge virus, which is relatively resistant to in vitro neutralization. So in contemplating these results, it's interesting to note na kahit po may panibagong variant na dumating, kahit po si beta variant ay medyo kakaiba na yung itsura niya compared to the original Wuhan variant, kaya pa rin siyang in-neutralize ng ating bakuna. Kahit po yung bakuna natin ay based doon sa original na China strain or Wuhan strain. And that is because our immune system learns and improves the specificity and the targeting of our antibodies over time. So as with everything, time is our sort of key helper when it comes to vaccine related responses. Kasi when you lengthen the time period, that you allow the immune response to mature, the better is the breadth and potency of neutralizing antibody levels. Na kahit pa man siguro kahit anong variant ang pwedeng dumating, kaya pa siyang i-neutralize or kaya siyang patayin ng ating original vaccine. Okay, so that's the first paper. Now, the second paper naman is by Gagni et al. And now, kung kanina pinag-usapan natin yung beta variant, ito medyo mas bago-bago siya. This is just now, this month lang. Kasi nga, what they were talking now is the Omicron variant. So, sinabi nila, okay, ginawa natin yung studies before sa beta variant kasi concerned tayo dun sa kanya. Ngayon, concerned din tayo kay Omicron kasi as you've read in the news, Omicron has the most number of mutations in the virus. In the spike protein alone, more than 30 mutations ang kanyang na-detect. So that there's a high possibility na baka hindi na naman mag-work yung vaccines natin against the Omicron variant. So very similar to the first paper, they also tried to develop an Omicron-based vaccine and see if this is going to be beneficial compared to just having a booster with the normal usual vaccine, or mas importante po ba na yung Omicron variant ang gagamitin natin as a booster dose. Okay, so again, they were using non-human primates or rhesus macaques here, and they were primed with the original 2 doses of the Moderna vaccine and boosted with either the original Moderna vaccine or boosted with the mRNA Omicron. So gumawa sila ng panibagong Omicron vaccine. Now, konting kwento lang, the mRNA vaccines, particularly Moderna and Pfizer, it's very easy for them to develop variant-specific vaccines, say Omicron-specific vaccine or Beta or Delta-specific vaccines. Kasi po yung platform ng mRNA is very easy to manipulate. So, ikumpara mo yan sa, say, inactivated virus like Sinovac or sa ating viral vector kagaya ng AstraZeneca, mas mabilis pong mag-develop ng mga Omicron variant vaccines, itong mRNA vaccines. Kaya mabilis po itong Moderna at Pfizer mag-test ng kanilang panibagong variants. Okay. So, ito po yung data na nakita nila. So, if you were just measuring neutralizing antibody levels against, these are the variants that are measured, the original Wuhan strain and then the Omicron variant. So, after 2 doses, the antibody titers were 4,000 for the original variant and 320 only for Omicron. Kaya po nakakatakot po kasi nga mababa lang yung kanyang effectivity to Omicron. And then after almost 10 or after 9 months, we expect waning immunity. So from 4,700, naging 270 na lang yung antibody titer niya. So very, very significant yung pag-drop after 9 months. Pero dito sa Omicron, from 320, naging 110. So this is now an impetus for us, since very mababa yung antibody levels, this is now an impetus for us to provide booster vaccination. So they provided booster to these animals at week 41, and 2 weeks after, they measured the antibody levels and see the impact of booster shots. From 270, umakyat ulit to 5,360 yung antibody levels. And ito pinaka-interesting, from 110, naging 2,980 ngayon yung antibody levels against Omicron. Now, if you compare that, originally 320 lang siya sa unang 2 doses. Pero nung nagbigay ka ng 3rd dose, naging 2,900, almost 3,000 na siya. So there's almost a 10-fold increase when you do a booster dose for a variant-specific virus, no, itong Omicron. So kahit if you're just using the same vaccine, the same Moderna vaccine 3 times, tumaas yung Omicron kanyang tawag nito antibody levels. Now, if you're using now 2 mRNA and then boosted with 1 Omicron variant-specific vaccine, ganun din halos yung nakita nila, nag-increase din siya from 110 to 1,930. So halos walang pinagkaiba. So again, similar to the data shown by the Beta variant, it suggests here that you don't need to have an Omicron-specific vaccine just to be able to kill the Omicron variant. Okay na yung original Moderna vaccine lang yung gamitin mo kasi it's also already enough to provide you high antibody titers, and in fact mas mataas pa siya ng konti kaysa dito sa binigyan mo ng Omicron specific vaccine, although mukhang hindi naman to significant. So again, our booster shots na original Moderna is sufficient for the Omicron wave that is circulating right now. And here again, similar data, antibody titers. 2 doses after the initial dose, you get a very high antibody titers. But after 9 months, we expect them to wane down. And then after boosting, they always go up again, suggesting here na the booster shots, either with the original Moderna or the Omicron variant, are sufficient. So we don't need to have this Omicron variant vaccine anymore. Either for the S protein or specifically the receptor binding domain, which binds to the ACE2. And here also in the neutralizing antibody levels using their lentiviral virus experiments. So you can see here after boosting, tumataas po yung kanilang antibody levels. Okay, and also with their avidity. So very similar to the data in the Beta variant, what they're seeing here is regardless kung original Moderna or Omicron-specific variant yung gagamitin mong vaccine, they can both be effective against the Omicron variant. Okay. Now, they're also looking again at the different lung samples. Again, nandito yung bronchoalveolar lavage and then the nasal wash. And very similar again, after 3 doses, you see an increase in the antibody levels in the bronchoalveolar lavage, suggesting that boosters with either 3 doses of the Moderna vaccine or with an Omicron-specific booster, both of them will provide high antibody levels in the lower lungs, here in the BAL, or in the upper lung airways in the nasal wash. Yan. Matataas po yung kanilang antibody levels here. Compare that here to the gray dots, which are control, na halos walang antibody levels na detect. Kasi these control animals were not vaccinated at all. Okay. And if you look at the quality of the antibody levels found in the lungs, here we see they can inhibit again the ACE2 binding. So you can see up to 60% inhibition, up to 75% inhibition against the Delta variant. And for the Omicron variant, up to about 50%, 40% reduction in ACE2 binding inhibition. Again, suggesting that the antibodies that we recognize or we measure in the lower lungs are effective in neutralizing or in inhibiting the binding of the virus to our cells. This well is true with the nasal wash. Okay, so and here they also found that again, similar to the first paper, after they did 3 doses of the vaccine, they then infected the animals with now the Omicron specific virus. Okay, so you would expect na kung kapareho siya ng data nung kanina sa beta variant, we also expect na itong Omicron variant will also be protected, against infection. So ito po yung mga gray dots are control animals, meaning they were not vaccinated. Pero in the red dots, they are animals that were vaccinated with Moderna, boosted with Moderna, and these blue dots naman are boosted with the Omicron specific Moderna. And as you can see, 2 days after infecting the animals, pareho pong mababa na rin masyado yung titers, viral titers ng mga vaccinated animals na to compared to the controls. And as early as 4 days after challenge, wala na silang nakitang virus doon sa mga animals na to in their lungs, suggesting that the vaccine was very effective against Omicron. Okay? Kasi wala silang nakitang virus dito sa lower lungs, sa BAL, and even as long as 8 days. Now, dito sa nasal swab, which is more on and the oral swab, more on the upper airways, mas may nakita pa silang viruses at the start, 1 day and 2 days after their infection. Pero the immune system of these animals were also able to suppress and kill these viruses such that by day 8 or 1 week after infection, wala na rin silang nakitang virus doon sa mga upper airways ng mga monkeys na to, suggesting again that given enough time, these vaccines are also very effective in suppressing viral infection in the upper airways kasi nga nasal swabs po ito. So again, the bronchoalveolar lavage, the nasal swab or oral swabs were collected, and they were found to be almost negligible na. Wala na silang virus na na-detect in the animals that were vaccinated with or boosted with the mRNA vaccines. Okay, so in summary, collectively, the data has shown that boosting with either the same homologous Moderna vaccine that we are currently providing to everybody right now, or in their exploratory Omicron variant vaccine, they both lead to comparable and significant increases in neutralizing antibody responses against all variants of concern, including Omicron. So again, the booster that we're giving now is effective against Omicron. So we don't need to have an Omicron-specific vaccine for now kasi the current vaccines that we had are already effective against Omicron. And so following their either boost, the study showed up to 80% of their spike-specific B cells were cross-reactive against both the original strain and the Omicron strain. So ito yung sinasabi natin, as our immune system matures, you will have more breadth and more width of antibody response. Mas marami na tayong cross-reactive ng mga variants na pwede nating patayin if we give our immune system some time. And there was significant and equivalent control of virus replication in the lower airways observed after either boost. So BAL, ito kasi yung bronchoalveolar lavage, talagang nakita nila na walang na-detect or nag-multiply ng mga viruses doon. And so this is important for us kasi sa lower airways, doon kasi yung nagkakaroon ng severe disease, yung may mga pneumonia, tsaka yung kailangan na natin ng oxygen sa mga pasyente natin. So doon po yun usually sa lower airways. So this is primarily siguro because Omicron is not as virulent compared to say Delta or the original strains. So kaya masyadong mababa na yung viruses na nadidetect dito sa lower airways, which can potentially cause more severe disease. So again, in conclusion, an Omicron boost may not provide greater immunity or protection compared to a boost with the current mRNA 1273 vaccine, saying that the rollout, the booster rollout of Moderna that we have right now is sufficient for an Omicron wave. As nakita naman po natin sa Pilipinas, gumanda po yung ating infection levels, bumaba po significantly kahit po kumalat yung Omicron, ay bumaba po ito after a month kasi nga effective pa naman yung ating mga vaccines against Omicron. Okay, so now I will turn over to Dr. Jean Solante for the discussion of the other paper. Doc Jean?
Yes, Mario, thank you. And my part is more on the safety and immunogenicity. This time among humans, So napaka-importante nung diniscuss ni Dr. Mario because that laid out the data na before human studies, okay? So dito, this is an updated data November 2021. And alam natin noong November 2021, mataas na rin ang rate ng Delta. So this is evaluating how safe and how good mRNA vaccine or Moderna vaccine in terms of producing an antibody and at the same time maintaining the safety of the vaccine. Okay, so we knew that after the second dose of the primary vaccine series, there was really waning protection, and that's why Moderna did a study on different doses, okay, different doses of the vaccine that will be applicable for the booster. Is it the 50 microgram, which is half of the primary vaccine series, or is it the 20 or the 50 microgram primary vaccine series, and then giving also a half dose of that, no? And they compared that with those who were not vaccinated, and they gave also a 100 microgram, the full dose of a Moderna vaccine. No? So the purpose of this part of the study was to determine if you give the same platform in the form of a Moderna vaccine, which among this will give you an optimized protection in terms of producing neutralizing antibody and at the same time maintaining the safety of the vaccine. The other arm of the study is the same group of population that were included in the COVID study. You know, the COVID study was the phase 3 study that paved the way by which all authorities, no, approving authorities, especially US FDA, na approve ang Moderna for the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, and it was proven in that particular study that Moderna, as a primary vaccine series, prevent symptomatic infection in 90%, and then prevent death in 95 to 100%. No? But this time, since there was already a possibility that the COVID virus will also mutate, so they incorporated what we call variant booster. So, which means that they incorporated specific variants of concern in the vaccine in order to stimulate and produce an antibody specific for that particular variant. And at the same time, they also incorporated several of these variants of concern. So they call this the multivalent booster or variant booster vaccine. So they give participants, like in 20 participants who were given the primary vaccine series, after 6 months, they gave 50 microgram of a Moderna vaccine, by which beta variant, called this the beta variant, variant of concern, was also incorporated. And then the other one is the Moderna vaccine, by which other variants of concern were also part of this vaccine at 50 microgram. And then a lower dose of the variant booster of your beta variant Moderna vaccine. Okay, so this is the variant boost. No? So it's a different type of variant because it incorporated also variants of concern to make the vaccine stable against other variants of concern. Next slide. So the first part of this data, they look at safety. So that's always the most important part when we do a phase 2 study. And here, the most common local adverse reaction, which was also shown in the primary vaccine series, was pain on injection site. And then this is followed by lymphadenopathy. Then you also have swelling and then erythema at the site of the infection or at the site of the injection. So these are expected. And this majority of the adverse reaction or local adverse reaction are only grade 1. In terms of the systemic adverse reaction, regardless of what variant booster was given and including the Moderna vaccine, the same adverse or systemic adverse reaction were seen with the primary vaccine series, and more or less in terms of the percentage, it seemed that it is also the same as that with the primary vaccine series. And the most common systemic adverse reaction are in the form of you have fatigue, headache, myalgia, arthralgia, and then some complain about chills and nausea and vomiting. So these are adverse events that we would expect if you're given this vaccine. We always emphasize the reactogenicity, and the presence of this systemic adverse event can also mean that our immune system has been stimulated. Okay, so all of these are grade 1 and tolerable. So there were no safety signals, there were no death, there were no adverse event related with death or debilitating adverse event. Next slide. Okay, so this time I will show you the immunogenicity data. So when we talk about immunogenicity data, it's about neutralizing antibody. It's the ability of the vaccine to stimulate our immune response to produce that antibody that will protect us against getting the COVID infection and also getting the severe form of the infection. And Dr. Mario emphasized the importance of this antibody, especially in the lungs, in the upper respiratory tract, because this is where the COVID virus enters our body, and having this antibody in this critical part of our body, especially the lungs, will prevent us from getting a severe form of infection. Okay, so let's start first with the mRNA or the Moderna vaccine. So this is the Wuhan wild type. So they tested against the Wuhan wild type. And you'll notice that after giving the Moderna vaccine, 50 microgram, there was increase in the neutralizing antibody, and significant increase was noted after day 29. And then when they also look at the mRNA 1273.351, so this is the beta variant booster of the Moderna, given as a third dose, then it also elicited a very good neutralizing antibody starting at day 1 and then increased on day 15 after giving the boost, and persistently, it has a sustained neutralizing antibody, high neutralizing antibody on day 29. Then they also look at the Moderna multivalent variant booster, and again, in fact, you have a very high neutralizing antibody compared to the Moderna vaccine and the other variant boosted using the beta variant. But again, all of these were all are important increases. So nothing is inferior in any of this level. And then they also measured the neutralizing antibody, this time with a lower dose, 20 microgram, as a variant booster for Moderna, and still elicited a very good neutralizing antibody. Now, in the right part of the slide, B, so they tested the antibodies produced by the same vaccines against the beta variant. Okay, and it's also the same as that with the D614G variant, because it elicited a very good neutralizing antibody from day 1 up to day 29, whether you're using a variant booster and a multivalent variant booster, both of which elicited a very high neutralizing antibody, and even a lower dose at 20 microgram, the same level of antibody, and more or less still above the limit of the detection. Next slide. Okay, so this is the different boosters now. So when we talk about homologous, okay, let's start first when a homologous booster of Moderna was given. So this is right before the after getting the primary vaccine series. You'll notice that before the booster dose was given at 6 months, it seemed that there was really waning protection because you also have a lower neutralizing antibody. But after giving the Moderna vaccine, you'll notice that the neutralizing antibody was very high and able to neutralize any of these variants of concern, from the beta variant to the gamma variant, including that of the Delta variant, and the other variant of interest. This time using the beta variant booster of the Moderna. So before the booster was given, there was also very low neutralizing antibody 6 months after the primary vaccine series. But after giving the beta variant booster, then there was also elevation of the neutralizing antibody with good elicited neutralizing antibody against all of this variant of concern. Okay, and then this is the multivalent variant booster. So it protects almost all of the variants of concern that was documented during the time up to the Delta variant. And it seemed that this multivalent variant booster also elicited a very good neutralizing antibody for all of these variants. So just to make this summary of this particular slide, that all of this, whether you give a Moderna homologous booster or a beta variant booster or a multivalent variant booster, all of this elicited good antibody response with the third dose of this vaccine. Okay, and then this is the Moderna booster shot, by which before the booster was given, nakikita natin talagang bumababa siya because of these variants of concern, which also affect the ability of the spike protein to produce an antibody because of the mutation. Okay, next slide. Okay, so these findings are seen in this particular slide, that even with any of this booster, whether it's Moderna booster without the variant or the new variant modified boosters like the beta variant and the multivalent variant booster, all elicited good safety profile and all were well tolerated. Now, in terms of neutralization titers, okay, I think there was not much significance of an advantage using any of this variant booster compared to the Moderna booster. So this also was the same findings by Dr. Mario, his data, that even with an Omicron boosted variant vaccine booster, the neutralizing antibody did not elicit superiority. No? Hindi siya mas mataas compared doon sa current Moderna vaccine na binibigay natin sa mga participants, no, or sa mga tao. Okay, so in a way, whether it's a variant boosted vaccine or a multivalent variant boosted vaccine or a Moderna vaccine, so far in all of these variants of concern, all three of these elicited neutralizing antibody. All three of these is expected to protect us against severe infection because of a very good T-cell response. And more or less, these are vaccines that we need and to continue to be protected to prevent surge and spike of cases. Next slide. Okay, so again, these are additional data when they look at the booster dose in terms of comparing which booster dose is better between an mRNA Moderna booster dose or beta variant booster. It's saying that any of this formulation can still elicit a very good immune response. And just take note that as variants of concern were tested against this booster dose, all of these were also good antibody were elicited against these variants of concern. Next slide. Okay, so we will end this talk by this summary of data. First, the importance of a third dose or a booster dose, which will restore the neutralizing antibody, and it is expected also to protect us. And we've seen lots of this real-world effectiveness data that the booster protects us from getting the severe and hospitalization, and that's why it helped us when we implemented the booster dose recommendation of the Department of Health. Hindi napupuno yung mga hospital natin, even with a heavily mutated virus. And that's what we are looking at this point in time, that hopefully everyone will get their booster shots, no? Okay. And second is that yes, the correlate of protection that were used in these studies are antibodies, because we know that antibodies are an important measure of how good vaccine is. And we know that protection, the presence of these antibodies, not only at the level of the site of infection, but also at the level by which the virus can cause more damage, like the lungs, is an important aspect of why vaccination is an important part of prevention of severe disease. And it also gave us a detailed information, the importance of a T cell immunity, because with your T cell, your T helper response, your interferon, your IL-2, and your TNF, these are the actual, these are the actual soldiers that directly kills the virus, okay? So meaning even if your neutralizing antibody is going down, but your T cells is the one that's still responsible in protecting us against severe disease, okay? And then we have also shown you the importance of boosting, either using a homologous Moderna vaccine and a variant-specific booster that yield similar levels of immune response that neutralize all virus or variants of concern in this data. So booster enhance also protection against this infection, especially at the site of infection. And I think the data showed to us that whether it's an Omicron specific variant vaccine or a beta specific variant vaccine, for now it is more or less the response in terms of neutralizing antibodies is still the same as that with the original Moderna vaccine. So for you who are thinking that we need an Omicron variant specific or a variant specific booster, we can wait for more data if there is really an advantage in using that. But for now, the current Moderna vaccine that we're giving is suffice and enough to protect us against COVID, including severe infection. With that, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Doc Jean and Doc Mario, for that very comprehensive presentation on the new studies of Moderna data. So we will now proceed with the question and answer. So we have Red Mendoza from the Manila Times. He is asking po, can we confirm that the Moderna vaccine is more effective as a booster even with a smaller dose dahil mas marami ang mRNA content ng Moderna than Pfizer? Doc Jean, Doc Mario?
Okay, I'll let Dr. Mario answer that.
Sige. So the booster for Moderna is actually lower than the original dose, kasi what they found out in their clinical studies was that 50 microgram is already enough to boost antibody responses. Ang kailangan lang naman natin kasi is to rescue the previous antibody levels or increase that, so that we can have a renewed protection. And so in that case, it's okay to use the lower dose for the Moderna vaccine, kaya yun din yung recommended nila ngayon for the booster vaccination styles.
Thank you, Doc Mario. Doc Jean, will you add something po?
Yeah, I'm okay with the response. Same lang kami.
Okay, thank you, Doc Jean. Thank you, Doc Mario. Next question po is, this is timely po with the ongoing vaccination of our pediatric population. Will Moderna be also available for the pediatric population similar to Pfizer? And are there any studies ongoing on this po?
Okay, so I think they already applied for the 12 to 17 years old now, and I think we already have an approval of that from FDA. I just don't know if there's an available formulation of the 12 to 17 years old available, but I know it has already been approved also in terms of usage for the 12 to 17. For those below 11 years old or below 12 years old, we don't have data yet on that, as far as I know.
Thank you, Doc Jean. Another question po. Moderna has released a statement regarding the development of an Omicron-specific booster. Are there updates regarding the current study being conducted on this booster shot?
So I can answer initially that. Ano. So yung pinakita naming data kanina was actually using the Omicron specific vaccines na the Moderna is developing. So maganda naman yung safety profile niya, maganda naman yung immunogenicity profile niya. Pero as what we were, emphasizing kanina, it seems that the immunogenicity and the efficacy of the Omicron specific vaccine is no different if you use a regular Moderna booster. So mukhang kagaya rin po nung time na nagka-Delta tayo, nung time na nagka-Beta variant tayo, initially kasi akala natin lahat na kailangan natin palitan yung vaccine kasi nagbago na yung virus. Pero our immune system is, maturing and developing much better breadth and better avidities to our antibodies na kaya na nilang mag-protect against other variants. So hindi natin, so far the data is suggesting na hindi natin kailangan gamitin yung Omicron specific vaccine kasi boosting with the regular original Moderna vaccine is already sufficient.
Yeah. So to add to that, I think the human phase study of the Omicron variant specific booster is ongoing, and that we want to really wait for, because if what Dr. Mario tells us that the immunogenicity in the animal phase of the study are the same as that with the original Moderna vaccine, then it will be interesting on how it will be in the human studies, no? And we know that the only advantage of an Omicron variant specific is that it is variant specific, but we know now also that with this regular vaccine, it has also protection against an Omicron. So we need to wait for that data, and hopefully we can have that data, because as we move on with this pandemic, we think that what we will be dealing longer will be the Omicron variant, especially the BA2, because of its high transmissibility. And that's why we are really emphasizing the importance of continued program of the vaccination. Receiving the booster is also quite important, because as we transition our alert level to 1 because of the lower number of cases, we need to maintain that protection to prevent the surge and spike of cases.
Thank you, Doc Mario and Doc Jean. Another question po. Compared with other available vaccines, how does Moderna fare in terms of side effects?
Doc Jean, can you answer
that? Yes. Okay, so we know always that the mRNA has a higher level of reactogenicity, compared to other vaccines. But again, if you look at the current adverse event profiles, there are adverse events that we are closely monitoring, especially for the mRNA vaccine, like the myocarditis in the younger population, the Guillain-Barré, and these are the two adverse events that needs to be closely monitored. But data are telling us that it's still very low compared to getting the COVID infection, where you have a lot of these complications. So the benefits still outweigh the risk of this very small and rare event. And I hope this adverse event will not be one reason why we don't want to be vaccinated, because we know that an adverse event will always be there for all vaccines. But we also saw the data that it's all safe, it's all tolerable, and most of these adverse events are self-limited.
Yes, and I will just emphasize what Doc Jean mentioned, the benefits overweigh, the risks. Kasi nga, the risk of getting severe infection if you are not vaccinated is very, very high. In fact, most of the admissions that we have in the hospitals are all mostly unvaccinated. So, yung sinasabi natin na side effects, kung mild lang naman yan, kung lagnat lang yan, or pamamaga, or pananakit ng braso, those are normal kasi nga your immune system is working to develop antibodies and T cells. So we should not be worried about it. Ang minomonitor lang talaga ng ating National Committee on Adverse Events are yung mga rare and severe cases na kailangan pong bantayan, as what Doc Jean mentioned.
Thank you, Doc Jean and Doc Mario. We have questions from Caroline Bongpin of CNN. First po is, Yun po bang findings sa monkey na walang virus sa upper airways at day 8 is one of the basis bakit na-shorten ang isolation period ng vaccinated mild COVID cases?
Indirectly, pero hindi naman siya talaga yung pinaka-basis kasi it's very hard to cross monkey data to humans. So we have to be very careful when doing those conclusions. In fact, we really need to have clinical data, phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical data to support that. So itong mga monkey studies and itong mga rodent studies, these are all just preliminary data, but they have to be repeated and they have to be validated in human clinical trials.
Aki, can I add to that? Okay.
Yes, Dr.
Yeah, so the basis for shortening the quarantine, especially with Omicron, was based on several papers na, these are, one of that na nakita namin was the Japanese paper wherein they compared those vaccinated and unvaccinated, and they compared the Omicron virus on how much the vaccine was able to decrease the viral load. Okay, and in fact, in that particular paper, it says there that if you are fully vaccinated and especially boosted, your viral load drops significantly earlier compared to an unvaccinated. So the average was like 5.5 days. The viral load is already significantly low compared to an unvaccinated, which will take around 8 to 9 days before the viral load drops. So these are in patients with mild COVID. Okay, so when you have mild COVID, you know that the viral load are a lot less compared to those with severe COVID. So this only proves that if you are vaccinated, you have shorter days of your viral load, and your viral load goes down quickly compared to an unvaccinated where you have longer viral load. And this is the rationale that when you are quarantined, you have shorter quarantine compared to you have shorter quarantine in fully vaccinated compared to an unvaccinated.
Thank you for those clarifications, Doc Mario and Jean. We have another question po. What is the recommended interval of the doses for Moderna? Is there a need to restart the administration of the doses if the patient surpasses the recommended interval of the first and second dose?
Okay. So sa bakunahan, pag na-miss mo yung specified interval, and Dr. Mario can add to this, being an immunologist point of view. So kung mamimiss mo yun, we don't restart. We don't restart. We'll just continue with the second dose. Now, if you also give the booster, tapos halimbawa, third month, dapat kailangan mo nang magpa-booster. Pero sasabihin na yung tao na, hindi ako nakapunta ng third month, pwede ba ako on the fourth month or the fifth month? So ang tanong doon, will I repeat my primary vaccine series before I can get the booster? No. So you'll still get the booster, although hindi na doon sa third month kasi hindi ka na nabakunahan doon. So fourth month, fifth month, pwede pa rin as long as you got the booster shot.
Yes, agree po ako sa sinabi ni Doc Jean, kasi nga we have memory din sa ating immune responses. So importante po 'yun.
Thank you, Doc Jean and Doc Mario. We have questions po from Caroline Bonkin from CNN. First po is, how long before the antibodies from the booster shot wanes po, and by how much is the expected decline?
So it's very ongoing pa yung mga studies na yan. Well, the CDC has demonstrated as reported, I think 2 weeks ago, na after 4 months medyo bumababa na ng konti yung protection against the booster shots. Pero that doesn't mean na kailangan na nating magpa-booster ulit. In fact, yung reduction niya is very minimal lang parang meron ka pa ring protection na around more than 70% pa. So that's still very high. Kasi our general rule naman, if you have more than 50% protection, then the vaccine is still effective. So with boosters kasi, if napansin nyo kanina sa data, with this particular Omicron variant, yung 2 doses of the vaccine is not sufficient to control Omicron. Pero if you provide a booster dose or a third dose, it is already sufficient to provide protection to Omicron. So ganun po ka-importante yung booster. So kailangan po natin yung booster na to so that we can have some form of protection against variants of concern, regardless kung Delta man yan or Omicron yan or kung sino pa namang variant na darating in the future. We believe that these boosters are critical, essential pa nga eh. Kulang yung 2 doses lang, kailangan talaga yung booster shot.
Yes. So just to echo that part of Dr. Mario's statement, no? Now, relating to our program now, I think we need to encourage everyone, no, na yung nakatanggap ng primary vaccine series, it's not enough protection. You need the booster. Now, if you want to transition to a lesser alert level and you want to be protected, that should be the current focus now of the government, is to really enhance and ramp up giving booster, especially the vulnerable population. We know cases are going down, but it doesn't also mean that it will not go up, no? And as we move forward with this ongoing transmission, although there are less cases, the population that we want to protect and should be emphasized to get the booster are the vulnerable population, because this will be the population that the protection will easily wane, and booster will be an important part of their protection.
Docs. Now we're down po to our last 2 questions for today. For second to the last is from Caroline Bongkin po again. How about a different vaccine brand or platform but boosted with Moderna? Same lang po ba ang outcome?
Yeah, Moderna is recommended as a heterologous booster kapag kunwari naka-receive ka ng ibang primary series, ano. So based on the DOH guidelines, yes, you can use Moderna as a booster for say Sinovac or AstraZeneca or even with Pfizer. Yes, Doc Jean?
Yeah, so I agree, you know. Ganun naman pa rin ang ano natin, you can either use the Moderna as a booster or any other mRNA or even a virus vector can also be booster shot for a Moderna vaccine.
Thank you po, Docs. For our last question po for today, is Moderna a more viable option for my first dose as someone with a history of cardiovascular disease?
Okay. The history of a cardiovascular disease is not a contraindication of any current vaccine that we are using for COVID, no? And in fact, we encourage them to get the vaccine. So the question is there now is wala pong mga bakuna na contraindication on any patient with a cardiovascular problem.
Thank you, Doc Jean. Now that those are all the questions that we can accommodate from our media partners. But before we end our Kapihan, may we ask po Doc Jean and Doc Mario for your closing messages po.
Okay, so I'll start. Thank you, Aki. Thank you also for our media partners, no? And we knew how important media is in conveying important messages on vaccination. And as we move and on with this pandemic, we knew that how important vaccine is, was able to control the cases, was able to prevent severe disease, and more or less, no, that will be an important part on how we will deal with this pandemic as we move forward. And please don't forget, no, to emphasize the importance of booster, especially now that our cases are going down, but still have the possible specter of surge and spike if we don't give the booster, particularly for the vulnerable population.
Yes. Sa amin naman, Aki, as researchers on vaccine development, we are very happy and we're very surprised in a way na kahit may dumarating na mga variants of concern and grabe yung mga mutations ng mga bagong variants, our vaccines still hold, the line, and they can still stand against these variants of concern. And in a way, we're very lucky. In a way, we're very grateful. We have these tools to control the pandemic. So ang aming pong request sa ating mga media partners is that magtulungan po tayo to convince our population na magpa-booster po tayo kasi ito so far ay napaka-effective in addressing future spikes and future variants of concern with this pandemic. And thank you for the opportunity, Aki, and to all our media partners.
Maraming salamat po Doc Jean and Doc Mario sa pagpapaunlak po ulit. And for the second time na your guest for our Kapihan po. Thank you also to our media partners. I guess that ends our Kapihan for today. See you again po sa ating next series ng Kapihan Session. Thank you and keep safe and be well. Salamat po.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Aki. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye po.